Hi, and welcome back to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is August 21st, and today we're going to hear part 2 of the article that we started yesterday entitled La Tomatina, a food fight like no other.
Would you go to La Tomatina, yes or no?
No.
Would you go to Buñol?
If it's not during the fight, yes.
Yeah, I think I would go. I'm not sure I would participate. I probably would. I'm still young enough, healthy enough. I'm not sure I would try to climb the 2-story grease pole, but I would probably get in there, have my swim cap and goggles. I'm not sure my wife would go. I need to ask her, would you be interested in this? I think she's going to say no. So from my understanding, they purposely have kind of there are different food grades, of course, and there are top-tier grades. These are tomatoes that were, for one reason or another, rejected. They're kind of overripe. Now, I'm guessing they do plan ahead to make sure there are enough tomatoes for La Tomatina. So maybe there are specific crops growing to throw at other people. So this may contribute to the food waste. But at least initially, when they were organizing La Tomatina into an official event, these were like the garbage crops that were going to get turned into like mush or food for cows and pigs and stuff.
Even as you were describing those tomatoes, trying to make them sound really unappetizing, my mouth was watering.
Me too. I was just thinking they're soft and ripe and juicy.
And they're perfect for making
yes,
sauce.
I agree.
Or making a stew. Oh, we got to stop. Let's jump into our article. If you're interested in joining La Tomatina, there are several things to consider. The event is now limited to 20,000 participants to ensure the safety of everyone involved. Furthermore, the organizers recommend arriving at Buñol a day or two in advance because many fun activities are held in the days leading up to La Tomatina.
During the tomato fight, participants should comply with the rules. Bottles and hard objects are not allowed to be brought to the fight for safety reasons. Only tomatoes that have already been squashed can be thrown at people. A whole tomato may injure someone if thrown with full force. Additionally, ripping other people's shirts is strictly forbidden. It is recommended that people wear eye protection gear, such as goggles, since tomato juice is very acidic and can irritate the eyes. Unsurprisingly, La Tomatina is an incredibly messy event, so people should wear old clothes that they don't mind getting stained.
After about an hour of merriment, the food fight concludes with the second blast of a cannon. Afterwards, the streets look like a scene from an awful massacre with every surface covered in blood-red tomato juice and pulp. Fortunately, a team of residents is ready to clean up the tomato residue. Many are surprised by how sparkling the streets look after they are washed. It turns out that the acid in tomatoes is great at removing dirt from surfaces.
For those seeking a unique and fun-filled experience, head to Buñol. La Tomatina offers the perfect opportunity to enjoy a food fight like never before.
Now, there's one point that I reacted to right away, and that is that tomatoes are acidic and they do remove dirt and stains from things. I found that out when I cooked tomatoes in a pot, and then it got some of the residue on the side of the pot clean because it's acidic.
I haven't made a good homemade marinara pasta sauce in a long time. I think I need to fix that. Maybe, it's already like miserably hot, but I feel like it's time to make a good spaghetti sauce. I haven't made some homemade pasta sauce in a long time.
That sounds delicious. Let's go back to the beginning and not talk about food. My mouth is just watering like crazy. So back to the beginning. Our title again is La Tomatina, a food fight like no other. Our first paragraph, if you're interested in joining La Tomatina, there are several things to consider. So that means before you get involved, before you get all enthused about going and reserving your ticket and everything, you need to know some things ahead of time.
I think this is a really useful article, too, if you are considering going to La Tomatina, because sometimes it's hard to anticipate the special, unique situations you will find yourself in. Things we'll pay attention to later. I was like, oh, yes, that's a really good point. Bring A, bring B, bring C, because it's a non-traditional tourist event.
Exactly. The event is now limited to 20,000 participants to ensure the safety of everyone involved. So usually when they have restrictions like this, it's because of past experiences. There were too many people. It got out of control. People got hurt. Things undesirable things happen. So they decide, this is how many people I think we can accommodate. We're going to limit it to 20,000. That's still a heck of a lot of people. Furthermore, the organizers recommend arriving at Buñol a day or two in advance because many fun activities are held in the days leading up to La Tomatina. And when I read this, I think of my granddaughter. So whenever my son and his wife and daughter travel together, they find all of these activities like do-it-yourself projects in hotels and stuff for their daughter. So I'm just thinking of my granddaughter having all this fun stuff to do before the food fight, which I hope they would keep her away from.
So I was thinking about, okay, what are some of the activities I would do? And I purposely didn't check what they do, but I'm just saying, if I'm not learning how to make a Bloody Mary, or if I'm not learning how to make some special pasta or some sauce or making pizzas, if I'm not taking some kind of cooking class in Buñol for La Tomatina, I don't know what we're doing. There should be games, there should be music, bars. This sounds like an absolute blast to show up if you're like 20 years old and you're ready to have a good party. This sounds like, I really hope it isn't too tame. Like, it should be like a really big, memorable event. I think there's tons of potential here. All right, let's go on to our next paragraph here. During the tomato fight, participants should comply with the rules. Okay, so we're changing pace from Bloody Marys and romantic cooking classes to, hey, we got to think ahead here because this gets really chaotic.
And you need to keep things under control. This is a town where people live, so you cannot just trash their town.
That's right. When we comply with rules, we just follow the rules. All right, rule 1 here. Bottles and hard objects are not allowed to be brought to the fight for safety reasons.
Now, I'm guessing that there were some incidents before where people were throwing bottles and they injured people, they broke, you've got glass, it would be a terrible scene. So this should be obvious, but they probably learned it the hard way.
Only tomatoes that have already been squashed can be thrown at people.
Actually, I wouldn't mind smelling like tomatoes. I would hate to smell like beer.
I agree.
I hate beer. Okay.
So I always use the word crush. For me, I personally visualize the way they do these, the way they kind of squash these tomatoes as crush. They'll kind of, if they're already ripe, they're very soft already. These aren't hard tomatoes that you sometimes can get. It's very easy to just use your hand and crush it.
It might be a good idea to put it in a pail while you're crushing it, or you're going to have tomato all over you before you even start.
Well, if you don't have tomato all over you by the time this is done, I don't know what you were doing.
But you don't need it before you start.
So crush, squash. I'm not saying squash is a bad verb. I just mentally always see it as crush, but whatever you want to use, both are fine.
Squash seems a little less careful.
A whole tomato may injure someone if thrown with full force.
Especially a not as ripe one that has been picked before it's fully ripe. They are very hard.
Yes, I agree. You could really smash some windows. If you hit someone in the teeth, you could break teeth with them.
Yes, that's right.
It can be very dangerous, especially if you're an athlete used to throwing. Let's continue here. Additionally, ripping other people's shirts is strictly forbidden. And I think this gets directly to what you have been kind of hinting at since at least day 1 here.
Yeah, and who in the world would have thought of ripping somebody's shirt?
Oh, I 100% could visualize this.
Yeah,
so,
some energetic young men.
That's right, energetic young men that have probably been drinking. If they don't have alcohol at this event, they have it in their hotel room. And now Karen said she doesn't know how many women go to this. So the videos I've seen, there are a fair number of women at this. There are more men.
Yeah.
But there are women there too. And of course, these men, just like at concerts or sporting events, sometimes grab women on their bodies, and that's illegal. But they do it because it's a chaotic event and you can't really truly police that. It's a free-for-all, to use that phrase. I'm not excusing this behavior. I'm just describing what happens, and I've seen at plenty of concerts or other rowdy events. Women do need to be careful, and they should be with other people. Let's continue. It is recommended that people wear eye protection gear, such as goggles, since tomato juice is very acidic and can irritate the eyes.
And that is very, very true. We've been talking about that.
If you dress like you're going to go swimming with like a t-shirt and like a sports bra or something, you're in good condition. Wear a swim cap, wear eye goggles that you would go swimming in. You're going to do okay. Your clothes won't get too messed up. Let's continue. Unsurprisingly, La Tomatina is an incredibly messy event, so people should wear old clothes that they don't mind getting stained.
And I think that is all self-evident what they're saying here.
I do recommend everybody wears white to this, though, too, because you're there to be messy, right? The purpose of La Tomatina is to have a big food fight, so embrace it by wearing something white that can get stained. You can't clean this anymore, but that's part of the memory. After you wash the shirt, it will remain red forever, and bring a nice marker. Once you have that clean shirt, draw all over it and have your friend sign it, and you have a nice little souvenir, one of a kind.
Otherwise, where's the evidence?
That's right.
After about an hour of merriment, the food fight concludes with a second blast of a cannon. And if it were me in one of the residences around there, I would breathe a sigh of relief.
Oh, I love that they use a cannon. They could use an air horn or like the PA system for some like air raid, just whoop, whoop, whoop. Instead, we got a good old-fashioned cannon blast, which just adds so much character to it.
That's true. It adds drama. People are going to stop and listen.
You will notice when a cannon goes off. Merriment is just a word that just means fun. And you already know this word because words like Merry Christmas. Merriment, Merry Christmas just means Happy Christmas, which is more common in England. Merriment is just another word for happy fun.
Right. In England, they mostly say Happy Christmas. So merriment and merriment, they're both fine. Afterwards, the streets look like a scene from an awful massacre with every surface covered in blood-red tomato juice and pulp. A lot of great words here. So first of all, massacre is when people kill a large number of people. And you have the Nanking Massacre. You have all kinds of massacres in history. We had them in the U.S. South against African Americans. So massacre is killing a lot of people. Every surface, every place that's exposed is covered in tomato juice, which is blood red, the color of blood. And pulp is the fruity, more substantial part of the tomato that's not juice.
That soft, wet, shapeless part of
Flesh.
The inside of a tomato. That's your pulp. This is a great sentence. I love the description here. Even if it isn't pleasant and a massacre, blood red, they're just very visual, and I can really see just it's terrible in the best way.
It's very graphic. That's right. Graphic means it can paint pictures in your head, and that's a good thing. Then you are successful as a writer. Fortunately, a team of residents is ready to clean up the tomato residue. So as a former housewife and as a mother, that's the first thing I think of. Who's going to clean this up?
I think this is also part of the fun personally. So we've had a hot day in August. You're around a lot of people, so it's very hot. There's a lot of anticipation. And then you have this blast of a cannon, and you have this incredible exertion of effort. And so you're really sweaty and hot. You're really exerting yourself for an hour. You're going at it hard like a workout. And then you have another cannon blast, and in come the hoses. Maybe not necessarily fire hoses, but the cool water, and you're with your friends and rinsing off. Honestly, this is kind of like a sexy movie scene, if I'm being honest.
The first thing I think of is cleaning up. The second thing I think of is finally those troublemakers are going to take a rest and be out of my hair for a while.
Yeah, I'm sure the local residents are pretty happy. But I got to say, I bet they're not complaining about that tax base. I bet all that money really does matter, local community there.
And all the business at the hotels and the souvenirs and all that. Many are surprised by how sparkling the streets look after they are washed. A lot of streets are not routinely washed. So if you've got a lot of gunk on them, you have to work hard to clean them, and then the acid in the tomatoes helps it. So actually maybe the town kind of comes out ahead. It gets cleaned up.
I wonder, all of those tomatoes, they get washed away, but they're sitting in the sewer system. Mm-hmm. I wonder if there isn't a little bit of a stink not long after as those tomatoes decompose and need to be flushed out of the sewer system.
Absolutely, and not just the stink, but the rats.
I was just thinking the bugs rats. Too, but the rats too. That's a very good point.
We have rats anyway. If you haven't noticed them, you haven't been looking.
All right, I think this is something. Okay, here's how I can dig deeper on this. What do they do with all that tomato stuff afterwards? I don't know that, and I couldn't find anything online about it. I might just write them. Just say, hey, we're just curious about this. What happens and how is the after effect? I bet you there's some person in some city council willing to talk about it.
I am absolutely curious, too. If they can kind of filter it out, they could use it as fertilizer.
Yeah, they certainly could.
I hope it gets used somehow so it doesn't all go to waste. Okay, it turns out that the acid in tomatoes is great at removing dirt from surfaces, and we've already discussed that, about that pot that I had at home that came out looking pretty clean after cooking tomatoes in it.
When we say something, it turns out, that means we discover finally and surprisingly. There was certainly no plan. It was not a science experiment where you were expecting at least some kind of a result. It was an accident.
Yeah, or it turns out that everybody was happy about it. That means you weren't expecting them to be happy. But in the end, it worked out well.
So before we begin our very short final paragraph, I just wanted to talk very briefly about other food-related fights. And so, if La Tomatina is not your speed, there are other things you can do. For example, you can go watermelon skiing, which I don't know. I'd rather go to La Tomatina personally.
Yeah, and I'd rather eat the watermelon too.
You can go to a wine throwing fight, which seems very closely related to this, but I would rather hang out with the people at La Tomatina than the people at the wine throwing fight.
And you're going to smell like wine, and that's a waste of wine. Maybe it's really bad wine that's soured, and then you really don't want to fight with it.
Yeah. Now, tomatoes may be too big, and so you want to flick something smaller. There is a grape throwing fight, but those probably, I bet those are harder to, they're easy to crush, but harder to throw. It's less satisfying. Plus, tomatoes are red, they're colorful. Well, you're getting hit with a purple grape, no good.
Okay, anything
All right,
else?
here's one. Mashed potato wrestling. Karen, we found the one for you.
No. No.
All right, two more. There is pancake racing available, but that sounds really kind of not exciting.
How do you race?
You flip them as you go. You flip it on the ground and you flip it, moving it forward, which you're bent over a lot. You're on your knees.
Now, I don't really eat pancakes, but I would rather eat them than flip them.
And last one, of course, the classic pie throwing fight. If there was ever a more throwable food, I dare you to name it. Pies are beautiful to throw, and there's a reason they're so famous for it.
Yeah, and I've read that in movies when you see pies being thrown, usually it's shaving cream.
Yeah, I've heard that too. It just looks nicer.
I don't know if it looks nice, but
that's just what I read.
It's light and it's less waste of food.
Cheaper probably too, right?
Yeah, I would guess so. Let's do that last paragraph.
For those seeking a unique and fun-filled experience, head to Buñol. La Tomatina offers the perfect opportunity to enjoy a food fight like never before.
I think that I would go with Chris's suggestion of visiting Buñol when it's not the time for La Tomatina.
I wonder, all right, go right before or go right after?
I would just avoid it entirely. I would. Spain is a beautiful country. They have wonderful food.
I bet you it's cheap right after, too, because everyone leaves, right? So all the hotel rooms are empty. All right, I'm going to go right after. Plus, I want to find out about the after effects. I'm curious.
Good enough. Okay, let's move on to our questions. Number 1, how did La Tomatina get its start according to the Day 1 passage?
Letter A, officials planned the event to entertain young people.
Ha!
No, they tried to ban or forbid La Tomatina from happening.
And they wanted those young people to just go behave themselves. They were not thinking of entertaining them. B, local residents got into a food fight during a parade. Now, it says, according to the Day 1 passage, we don't know that for sure. We believe that might be the origin. And that is the correct answer, letter B.
Let's look at letter C really quickly. Farmers were trying to get rid of excess tomatoes.
That is often the origin of a lot of these unusual food festivals. There's a huge harvest of something. They don't know what to do with it, so they feature it at some big festival. I can imagine there being a festival for corn, for example, where my family is from in South Dakota. They grow a lot of corn. And letter D, the government wanted to boost tourism. I don't think that's how it started, but that may be one of the reasons why it continues. Okay,
I agree.
Let's move on to number 2.
What can we learn about La Tomatina from the Day 1 passage?
A, it is held on the same date in August every year. This is not true. It is held on
the final Wednesday of every August,
which means it will not be the same date from year to year. That's not the right answer. B, the event takes place in different parts of Spain each year.
Nope, it's from Buñol, so we know that it's not going to be moving around. Only the date will change. Letter C, the government supported this event when it first appeared.
No, they tried to forbid it.
That's right. They even held that little funeral, and then Karen ate from the casket.
I would hog as many tomatoes as I could carry.
Reaching into the grave.
Yes. I read a lot about coffins because I'm reading this ancient Chinese work.
Okay.
And they give very, very elaborate descriptions of the inner coffin, the outer coffin, the grave. So I'm really used to this stuff. Doesn't bother me.
I like that description exists. Disgusting. I wouldn't reach into it. All right, letter D. Go ahead.
A tomato fight starts after the first cannon is fired and lasts 1 hour. That is true. The answer is letter D. Number 3.
What should participants in La Tomatina keep in mind?
Letter A. All participants must help clean up after the event. Now, as a mother, that's the only fair way to do it, but it is not the answer.
Letter B. They can only book tickets on the day of the event. No, that's not true because they do events days in advance of La Tomatina. They want you to show up and stay for a week.
Right. The number of participants is limited, so you have to plan this ahead of time and book. Letter C. Whole tomatoes are not allowed to be thrown at others. That is a correct answer. You have to squash them or you have to smash them first before you throw them, so they are less dangerous to throw.
And letter D. Other activities held after the tomato fight also require tickets, but we didn't discuss that.
That's right. They said there were a lot of activities before and possibly after, but they did not go into detail and they did not talk about tickets. Okay, number 4. According to the Day 2 passage, which of the following objects can be carried in a tomato fight? So this one's going to be kind of obvious. The first picture is a pair of scissors, and I am going to have to come clean and admit something from my childhood.
Okay.
My sister still holds it against me. We were kind of just rolling around and wrestling on the floor, and I took out a scissors.
And?
My sister screamed.
Oh.
My father made me write 35 times, I will not use a scissors as a weapon. Marilyn, this is for you.
This is funny. So.
No, it was not funny. She still is mad.
All right, well, to be fair, I've never been attacked with scissors, but I just feel like our author is maybe messing with us a little bit. Hey, what shouldn't you bring to the tomato fight? Scissors.
Yeah, obvious. Not obvious to me when I was 6 or 8 or however old I was, but man, I sure learned my lesson. All right, the second picture.
We have a bottle of water, and that looks like maybe this could be a glass bottle of water, and well, number one, we don't need water in a tomato fight, and we really don't need glass. Remember, bottles are not permitted in the fight.
That's not a good thing to bring in any case, so it's not B. The third picture, letter C, is goggles, and they're the kind of goggles that you would wear in a laboratory when you're doing chemical experiments, and there may be dangerous fumes or liquids in the air. So that is the correct answer. You can bring that into the tomato fight, and you should, to protect your eyes.
And letter D, don't bring a rock to the tomato fight. What are you doing?
Pretty obvious. Okay, that's it for today. That's another travel option for you might want to look into. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.